a few words to say. Great. Okay, hi everybody again. This is Winnie and Lisa, and thanks for coming. We have a fairly busy agenda tonight, so without further ado, we're just going to get into our program for the evening. Our program will be about the many resource management projects that are currently going on in Riverbend Park in their various ecological communities and plant communities. I know most of you have been to Riverbend Park and certainly enjoyed the splendor of the bluebells. It looks like if you see, where is he? Tim Hackman. He's got the bluebell site right behind him on his screen. But there's a lot more going on at Riverbend than would meet the eye. So we're going to get right into that program, and then we have those other agenda items following. So to begin with, I just thought the best way to do it, to minimize me talking, is to introduce Casey Pittrizzi. He is one of the park employees, along with Kylie Lee. There might be other ones, I'm not sure. But I just thought, Casey, you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then your other members that are on the line, and then you can go ahead and start your program, okay? And everybody, you can maybe mute yourselves. And then we'll have discussions afterwards. Thank you.
Sounds good. Hello, everybody. I'm Casey Pittrizzi. I've started working at Riverbend Park as the natural resource manager in April of 2022. Prior to that, I've worked several jobs at various parks. Huntley Meadows Park included, Green Spring Gardens. And I actually, even though I just started working at Riverbend Park in 2022, I was in other jobs that worked in the area. I used to do naturalist guided trips at Seneca Regional Park, just north of it, Algonquian Regional Park, and at Riverbend Park and Scotts Run Nature Preserve. I ran a nature camp at another park that visited many of those parks. So became very familiar with the area and always loved it. So I'm really happy to be in this job. I'm a lifelong naturalist, love being outside and into birds, reptiles, amphibians. So love getting outside, learning, and really excited to be working at Riverbend and meeting a lot of the regulars, a lot of local support, the Friends of Riverbend Park. And yeah, just happy to be chatting with you all today. And I'll let Kylie introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kylie Lee. I'm the site manager of Riverbend Park. I've been with the Park Authority since 2012, so it's been about 12 years now. And I started my career off working at Huntley Meadows Park and being a roving naturalist for Fairfax County Park Authority. So I was at Huntley Meadows for about a decade, really. And then I've been at Riverbend Park since for the last 2 years, since 2022. And I'm thrilled to be here with everybody tonight and really excited to share the great things that we're doing at the park, natural resource management wise. Okay. Let's see, I'm not seeing the presentation up.
Oh, I didn't put it up. I'm sorry. I put it up earlier, but do you want to share it so you can see your notes?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's see here.
It did work for me, so it should work for you.
Let's see, are you seeing the presentation or the whole?
You can see the whole thing.
Okay.
If you hit you should be able to do like slideshow presenter view, I think. And now we can see the presenter view though.
It doesn't?
Yeah, I mean.
Let's see. Sorry about this, folks. My computer decided to do a restart right when we logged on. So let's see here.
No. Does it look like it's done now? I think it's not quite done.
If everybody could put themselves on mute, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much. Thank you.
And Kylie, let me know. I can put the slides up too. And you can, if you want to have the notes on your screen or something. I can try
Yeah,
to
why don't you
it
do
way.
that? Because yeah.
Okay. I'll just do it and then show just the slideshow.
Okay, that sounds good.
I think I'm sharing my screen right now. So come on. I'm kidding. There we go. Does that everybody see that?
That's
Perfect,
perfect.
perfect.
Yep.
Cool.
Perfect. Okay, so we're cooking. Okay, so welcome everybody. Alrighty, so I think we did our introduction. So today we'll talk about the natural resource management projects that we do at Riverbend, a little bit of background about Riverbend and projects we've planned for the future. You can do next slide, please. The Fairfax County Park Authority is a four-time winner of the National Gold Medal for Excellence in Park and Recreation Management. This honor capped ongoing preparation and commitment to the highest level of service in parks and recreation and recognized Fairfax County as a role model for park systems across the country. The Park Authority is comprised of over 400 parks, 29 of which are staffed and consist of rec centers, lakefront parks, golf courses, and resource-based nature centers, historic sites, a garden park, and a working farm park too. Riverbend Park is classified as a resource-based park, which conveys its purpose as primarily to preserve, protect, and interpret natural and cultural resources. The foundation of our work follows the Park Authority's and Riverbend's missions, which speak to preserving natural and cultural heritage while offering education, outdoor recreation, and passive recreation that is compatible with preservation goals. This photo that you can see on the right is of the bald eagle's nest on Minnehaha Island. And it's an active nest, and that's where, you know, staff and visitors really enjoy watching eaglets be hatched and raised each spring if we're lucky. So if you come to the park, hopefully you can check it out. Riverbend Park's rich habitats are part of a 411-acre tract of land on an inside bend of the Potomac River. Of the 411 acres, 97% are undeveloped. As the only staffed Fairfax County Park Authority site on the Potomac River, the park's remote setting, diverse habitats, and river make it a natural attraction for people and wildlife. The Potomac River forms the park's eastern boundary with 2.5 miles of shoreline along the Potomac Heritage Trail. To the north, Riverbend is bordered by the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority property, and to the south, Riverbend borders a small parcel of land owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which links Great Falls National Park. Private subdivisions make up the western boundary, and the park has 12 miles of multi-use trails for hikers, dog walkers, mountain bikers, and equestrian trails as well. And Riverbend also oversees or has 400,000 visitors per year. Riverbend is part of the Potomac Gorge, which is a federally designated area described as one of the most biologically diverse ecosystems in the United States, which extends from the park downriver to Theodore Roosevelt Island. The park is primarily deciduous upland and river floodplain forest. There are also meadows, ponds, seeps, and streams. Park staff are here to protect the unique natural and cultural resources while providing opportunities for visitors to experience educational and recreational experiences. We offer many services for the community and visitors to enjoy the beauty and tranquility of the park and all it has to offer. Our public boat launch is open year-round when river levels are at safe levels to be open. Our kayak and canoe rentals are very popular during the summer season too. And during warmer weekend days, you can see families enjoying the free first come, first serve picnic tables and grills by the river, or by reserving our outdoor picnic shelters. The park runs about 500 programs a year with a robust summer camp season, school field trips, birthday parties, naturalist-led programs, and our large annual events like Bluebell Festival in the spring and Virginia Native American Festival in the fall. In 2022, Riverbend Park opened up the first Virginia state licensed forest preschool in the Park Authority. We also offer guided kayak wildlife tours as well. The Visitor Center offers park information, a gift shop, exhibits, and live animals as well. There are designated fishing areas and 12 miles of multi-use trails. And what you'll see in the lower right-hand picture is a photo of a family enjoying the Virginia bluebells, which are a floodplain spring ephemeral flower that bloom around mid-March, late March, and you can see them through about mid-April. So if you haven't come by to see the bluebells at Riverbend, we hope you do. Riverbend wouldn't be able to accomplish so much without the support of important partnerships, some of which you can see on this slide, including Friends of Riverbend Park. In addition to these partnerships with other organizations, Riverbend also has a robust volunteer program that has about 200 volunteers a year. And so these volunteers participate in regular weekly volunteer opportunities like exhibit animal care, roving trail monitors, and adopt a spot. And some of these volunteer opportunities are one-time volunteer opportunities like trash cleanups and invasive plant removals. And Riverbend Park and the Park Authority are very grateful to all these great partnerships. Riverbend Park exists to protect and preserve the natural and cultural resources while offering mission-compatible visitor services. The foundation for the work we do at Riverbend starts with the park's mission statements and plans, like the Natural Resource Management Plan. As a resource-based park, it's imperative that management plans give consideration to the resources and allow public use only as it is compatible with resource protection. Riverbend Park is one of 3 natural resource-based parks that has a full-time merit natural resource manager. With rare and globally rare ecosystems that aren't found in many other places, the natural resource manager is critical to help manage and protect these areas. Riverbend staff also work very closely with the natural resource branch on projects elsewhere at other sites as well. And so there's a lot that goes into protecting and preserving the natural resources of the park. And so I'd like to pass it on to Casey to talk about some of the great projects we do.
Okay, I went the wrong way there, sorry. So yeah, I'm going to take us through some projects, some of which are kind of quicker, like 1 to 2 year projects, some of which are much longer term, and just give you a little bit of background information about each one. And I think we'll have hopefully some time at the end for questions as well. One of our biggest ongoing kind of constant projects is non-native invasive species management, and mostly on the side, pretty much almost exclusively on the sides of plants. We do help with documentation of invasive insects. We work closely with Fairfax County Urban Forestry, who kind of takes the lead on that with forest pests. But for the most part, my role and the Park Authority's role is very much focused on invasive plant species. And to give you some perspective, we work closely with the state of Virginia Natural Heritage Program. And so they have great guides and information on the invasive species that are currently in Virginia. The most up-to-date list has about 101 species on it. And about 45 of those have been documented at Riverbend to date. And it's hard to say if that's the correct number because we're over 400 acres and there's a lot of space to cover. And there's definitely new species being found everywhere. But we also search for species every year that we don't find, which we're excited about too. So a big part of my job as the natural resource manager is documentation of these invasive species. So when I started in 2022, I actually was very lucky. There was a natural resource manager before me who had already started this documentation program based on past observations of park staff, volunteers, and the general public. So I'm going to shout her out, Rita Peralta. She currently works for the Natural Resource Branch. She did a great job laying the foundation of a lot of this documentation. So she made my job coming in really, really easy. And so with 45 plus species, it's kind of like, where do you start? And one of the things we do is we do a program called Early Detection Rapid Response. And if you get into invasive species management, you probably will hear the acronym EDRR. And this doesn't necessarily mean we don't focus on all of the species that are found at Riverbend at any given time, but what we do try to do is prioritize. So the picture on the right is what we call the invasion curve. And what we're trying to do is identify the species that are before that phase 3 on the far right, where it says local control and management only. And when we identify species that are just in the introduction phase, in the detection phase, where their prevention or eradication are simple, if we act really quickly, we know we can win the battle against invasives much easier. And we can prevent those species from getting into that phase 3, where they're completely established and complete eradication is likely impossible when we're in the just control phase, where we're only controlling them in specific areas. So at Riverbend, we've identified 14 species that kind of fit that EDRR definition in just the park. That doesn't mean that those species aren't fully established in other parks elsewhere. It's not on this list, but I'll use an example. Japanese knotweed is a common invasive species that has taken over many areas and has completely overtaken many parks. But we consider it one of those 14 species at Riverbend because luckily it hasn't gotten to that level. So I just didn't include it on this list because it's on the list as a priority, but I wanted to highlight the 5 species listed here. So I'll go through those really quickly to give you some information about them. And part of the reason for doing this is if this is a species you see in the park and you get to learn, one of the ways that we find out about species in the park is sometimes from the public. This species, Incised fumort, Coriodalis incisa, was actually first identified by a member of the public in the park. It was in 2023. Someone hiking along the Potomac Heritage Trail going north from the visitor center took some pictures and said, I think this is this newer invasive species. And we looked it up and then we went out and saw it in the field. And sure enough, unfortunately, it was. So this is a newer invasive that's being found in many of our floodplains. It is a really, really small, leafy, kind of fringed, lobed leaf, spring ephemeral. So it's only out in the spring. You're not going to see it this time of year. You're only going to start seeing it in March through about late April, maybe into early May. And this is 2 pictures that were taken at Riverbend. It has a kind of purplish, pinkish flower that almost looks like a little trumpet. And it drops a seed pod that is distributed by floods and distributed by insects. In fact, ants often carry it because it has an eliasome, which the ant thinks it's a food product and it'll carry it and it'll spread it that way. And one of the scarier parts of this species is in other sites that I've visited, it is slowly overtaking native species. So we're trying to get ahead of it and prevent it from getting to that point at Riverbend. So far, we've found it in about 8 different areas along the floodplain, and we've tried to attack it really quickly. We've used a mixture of mechanical removal, so digging it out. We've used a specially selected herbicide to just spot spray small spots. The problem with this species is it likes to grow right under Virginia bluebells. And so if we use an herbicide, we can potentially damage a lot of those. So we have to be really careful with that. So this is one we're keeping an eye out for in the park. And if this is one you see, you can always report it to the visitor center. And again, it's only in that March through April timeframe that you're going to actually see it. A similar species in the time it grows is lesser celandine. So this is actually one that grows at Riverbend Park, not right along the trail. It is very common along trails in some parks, and in some parks in Fairfax County and elsewhere, it is littered kind of all over the floodplain, and it's the only flower you'll see. And it's a really pretty wildflower, but it is very invasive, and it displaces native species. So some examples are Lake Akatank, Difficult Run Stream Valley. If you go to parts of those in the spring, March, April time, this is about one of the few only wildflowers you'll see. And so at Riverbend, that's what we're trying to prevent this species from getting to that point. And to give you some perspective on the park map, if you're hiking along the Potomac Heritage Trail, you're probably not going to see too much of it. But if you were to turn into the woods, away from the river and walk a little bit, you'll come across these, what I call floodplain chutes, where when it really floods, the water kind of pools up and even starts to flow. And it changes the soil a little bit and makes it harder for other plants to grow. So it kind of creates these open soil covered, I don't want to say barren because there's some plants that grow there, but it creates this perfect area for lesser celandine to grow.
And Casey,
so,
as I recall, it also spreads through rhizomes. Is that
yes,
correct?
yes, this is a species that spreads through roots and tubers and through seeds. So it spreads multiple ways, and it's very prolific, and it's a very difficult one to dig out. Whereas the incise fumort, you can be successful in some it's much harder to dig out lesser celandine. So this is one we typically treat with herbicide treatments. We use a mixture of contractors and then staff to do that. And we do that earlier in the season to prevent any collateral damage with native species. And we've been doing that for many, many years successfully. Thankfully, we've prevented it from spreading any further, and we've even slowly decreased its number in areas. It is a perennial plant, so the root structures do survive, and they shoot up new ones every year. But the herbicide prevents it from spreading any further, and hopefully underground, but also spreading any more seeds by treating it before the bloom time. So this is another one. If you ever were to see it, it's good to report it and let us know, because we'll try to get on top of it really quick in the spring. Wavy leaf basket grass, kind of a funny name. So this is a plant that we're kind of moving away from the floodplain, although it is possible to see this along the floodplain. This plant does a little bit better in the upland parts of the park. And in the past, about 5 years, it had only been seen in a few small select areas along the Follow the Hollows Trail, which is kind of in the central part of the park, and along the Bootlegger Trail. And during some surveys in 2023, my natural resource intern, Clay, started coming across bigger sections of it off in the kind of central northern part of the park, and eventually started finding really big patches of it. And this is a species that forms really dense carpets on the forest floor and can start to displace native ferns and other native grasses as well. So this is a perennial plant, so it survives more than 1 year. So even though the green parts of the plant will die for the winter, the roots survive and they'll shoot up new plants in the spring. And then the seeds of this plant are incredibly sticky. And so what will happen is in August through September, the seeds will be kind of spread up from the plant. So anywhere from about a foot to 1.5 feet, sometimes off the ground. And deer, fox, animals, people, pets will walk by it, and those seeds stick to their clothes or fur, and then they get distributed wherever that animal goes. And so this is a common one you'll see start growing along trails. In fact, that's where we started seeing it in some of these trails, and then we basically just followed it in and started finding the larger patches. So this is another one that we'll treat with spot spraying with herbicide. But this is also one you can have success with pulling. So we've had volunteer events both at Riverbend and Scotts Run where we've pulled patches of it and made a dent in it. So definitely some use for mechanical removal as well. And we're trying to prevent it from getting any worse at Riverbend. So the last 2 years have been a heavy focus on removing and treating this species. Five-leaf akebia, kind of a funny name. Another common name for this species you might hear is chocolate vine, and because the leaf in the spring, if you kind of crush it up in the flower, have a chocolatey smell. And so this is a relatively newer invasive that the Park Authority is starting to focus on and spread awareness about. The picture on the right is actually in the park. That bridge behind it is at Clark's Branch. So this is the northern part of the park. And so the green vine that's growing up that American sycamore tree is actually how we found this plant. I'm walking along with the former manager, John Callow, and we look, I wonder what that vine is. And we walk up and look closely, and on the left, you can see a close-up of the plant, of the leaves. And we suspected that's what it was when we sent it to a colleague of ours, the picture, and they confirmed this was five-leaf akebia. So this is a vine that can do a couple of things. One, it can grow up a tree like this and totally shade out a really tall tree, even in the American sycamore. But it can also grow these really thick, dense barriers on the forest floor and totally shade out the lower plants as well. So it basically will shade out just about anything that's on the ground and anything above it. And I've unfortunately seen parts of Fairfax County where there are areas that it's totally over encased parts of the forest. And so when we found this, we kind of jumped on it quickly. We cut the vine, we treated the stump with an herbicide to prevent regrowth, and then we revisited the area regularly to address any new growth. It is still in that same area, but we've addressed the vines that were growing up the trees. It wasn't just growing up on the sycamore trees. You could see it growing on pawpaws and some other smaller trees. So this is one we're going to be constantly monitoring for and working on. We've had some volunteer groups help pull this vine mechanically out of the ground and cut. We've also had interns from other sites help us from the IMA program, which is invasive management area with Fairfax County Park Authority, and interns from Huntley Meadows even come out and help us with this one. So it's a tough one to remove, but it's one we're going to be continuously focusing on. And the last species to highlight is Tree of Heaven. And the picture on the right I wanted to put up because this is at Riverbend. Last winter, if you were walking in the park, you might have come across some trees that had these yellow X's on them. And that was because they were Tree of Heaven or Ailanthus. And the focus on this species is kind of tied to another invasive species known as the spotted lanternfly. So that insect in the center is actually a larval stage of the spotted lanternfly. That was also taken at Riverbend, unfortunately, this summer. And so we have documented spotted lanternflies in the park and throughout Fairfax County. The Tree of Heaven is actually their host tree. They're a sapsucker insect, so they almost exclusively go on Tree of Heaven. However, we have seen them going on other plants as well and trees, so that is also a concern. So we've had a big focus on identifying and removing Tree of Heaven. We've known Tree of Heaven's in the park for a while, and it has been a priority, and it was treated before I worked at the park as well. But as I started, it became more of a focus because of the spotted lanternfly. We began to look for it more and more, and eventually identified about 70 trees in the park, which was way more than we thought we had. And so we made a very focused effort to remove it via treating the into the bark with an herbicide, cutting down some of the smaller ones. And we also got some money from the Urban Forestry Department to actually have tree companies help remove the trees this past winter. And we'll be doing that this winter again as well. So you might see more work like this where some trees are marked, and in the winter they'll be coming out to remove them and treat them to prevent regrowth. So this is one we're going to be working on continuously removing as well. So we work on many other invasive species, so I can't not talk about volunteer groups. As Kylie mentioned, we have a lot of partnerships throughout the park, and we get a lot of support. The picture on the right is actually from a removal effort we had this past Sunday, yesterday. Our visitor services manager and several other staff led. This is a group removing autumn olive in our restoration meadow. So they went in and cut down, gosh, probably at least 12 to 15 truckloads worth of autumn olive out of the meadow. And we're going to be working on a prescribed burn in that meadow. So we're hoping a combination of cutting ahead of time and then a prescribed burn will help eliminate the plant. But we're going to be working on revisiting the ones that were cut and treating any that resprout after that. And we also do volunteer cleanups along the Potomac Heritage Trail. The picture on the lower left is Kylie, myself, and a volunteer, Tim. And it was actually taken by Bill Canis, who's a volunteer with us, and we were removing Oriental bittersweet and bush honeysuckle along the Potomac Heritage Trail. Even though those species are kind of well established, we are having a focused effort along the Heritage Trail to restore several areas as well to get them back to a little bit more native and more plant diversity. So huge thank you to our volunteers and our work groups for all that work, because it is going through that meadow was a lot of blackberry and thorns, and so those were very dedicated people going through. And then working on the Heritage Trail, it's often working on the steep slopes and eroded banks of the river, and it takes a lot. So a huge thank you to everyone helping with that. So while invasive is a big focus, we do also do a lot of restoration plantings. A big project for my intern this year was documenting all of our past restoration plantings. And so the map on the right is just a short glimpse of the center of Riverbend Park. All those blue dots are plantings the park has done over the last 10 plus years. And they're mostly woody species that were put in areas that were either damaged from trails that were unofficial, created by people, damage from erosion, or areas we're trying to restore with native species. So all the green dots are another method we were trying to fence off trees that were already growing. So last fall, we had a really good oak acorn drop. And in the spring, we went in, it was the first project for my summer intern. She went in and fenced off as many oak saplings that she could find to protect them from deer browse, so they had a chance to grow to a larger size. So this is just the start of our documentation efforts. We're going to be revisiting a lot of these planting sites. If you see a small tree with a cage around it, which you probably will at Riverbend, this is what they are, is a small restoration planting. We also have larger scale restorations. So we have 3 meadow units that were restored in 2018 and 2019. And these were done with the Helping Our Land Heal project with the Fairfax County Park Authority Natural Resource Branch. Those restorations involved a heavy invasive species removal treatment, in some cases, some soil retilling, and then a native seeding. So they went in and seeded natives in these meadows and then monitored what was growing, and then did some other invasive treatments afterwards. And then from there, kind of let things take their course. And it's been a great project. All of them have been pretty successful in different rates. On the map on the right, you can kind of see the red lines, and hopefully you can see if I can actually point them out. The largest one is in our main meadow. It's labeled RB1 there. It's right by our corn crib or barn. And that's a pretty popular one for bird watching. We have bluebird boxes out there, and it's one of the most successful ones at the park. The smaller one, RB3, is right by our maintenance shop along the road. It's kind of hard to notice it is a meadow, but it's a really small, and it's got a huge amount of native diversity. So it's a good one. And then the one that's the second one is near the nature center, and it's kind of a little forest and meadow restoration. There's been some woody plantings, but also some grass plantings as well. And we actually did a replanting there this fall to help restore it a little bit, because that one had a lot more invasive encroachment after the project. We manage these as meadows through a combination of either mowing or burning in the winter months. So, and that's actually the next slide I'll talk about. So the park does do prescribed burns. We work with the Natural Resource Branch on that, and we get the approval of the Fairfax County Park Authority Board and the park neighbors. We only perform the prescribed burn on weather when the weather permits. So we want the wind going a specific direction, we want the humidity just right, and we want the temperature to be right as well. We conduct these in the winter to have the least amount of impact on wildlife. So many of our amphibians, reptiles are hibernating or burmating. Many of our breeding birds are far south. Mammals are either underground or they're able to get and escape the area. And so we do that to minimize the impact on the land and the wildlife. And the idea with the prescribed burn is it clears the area, it prevents woodies from taking over and from it becoming a forest. So we're maintaining it as a meadow to have worm season grasses and to benefit grassland birds and insects and other species as well. During the burns, we do close the trails around the park for safety, and we use vehicles to wet the entire fire break. So there's a big mowed area that gives a space between where we're burning and where we don't want to burn. And then we wet that area with hoses and big tanks of water to prevent the fire from escaping as well. So there's a lot of work. It usually takes about 20 to 25 people to conduct a prescribed burn. So we thank all of our partners with that project as well. We are planning to do that this winter if the weather permits. We had a plan to do it last year, but the weather just wasn't right for it. So we didn't want to do it unsafely. So we used other methods to work on our meadows. So a big project coming up for next year is going to be taking a little closer look at some of our ecologically significant plant communities. And just to give you some background, the park has done natural vegetation community classification with the Natural Resource Branch. And basically what that is the park botanists will go, an ecologist, and look at certain areas of the park, and they'll classify them. They'll give by definition of these classifications. So they'll look at multiple features, the types of trees that are growing, the types of herbaceous plants, the landscape, the geology, and in some cases, even the wildlife can help determine what kind of definition this forest or area falls into. And so Riverbend, when the classification was initially done, was found to have several globally and state rare communities. And I'm just going to highlight a few we're going to focus on. And one of them is the Central Appalachian Piedmont low elevation rich boulder field forest. So the map on the right shows you these light green areas. And this is a zoom in of the very northern tip of the park. So if you look in the center, there's that cleared area. That's the transcontinental pipeline. If I don't change the slide. And those green areas are very steep slopes. So this area is categorized by very steep rocky slopes. And some of the kind of characteristic plant life includes basswood, sugar maple, and a mixture of native ferns that kind of like these really steep slopes, such as marginal wood fern, maidenhair's fern, and some others. So we're going to be taking a closer look at some of these areas and comparing them to surveys done in 2017 to see what's changed, if there's any new threats. These have been some tougher areas to access because of the steep slopes. So we're going to be really careful when we do it. And we're going to be looking for some of those potential threats, such as invasive species, off-trail usage, things like that, and seeing if there's any new plant life and if the rare species still exist there. The kind of pinkish one further right is one of our high terrace floodplain forests. And so this is a kind of a unique area because it has a species known as black maple. So you're probably familiar with sugar maple trees or red maple trees. They're some of the more well-known ones, but there's a species called black maple that's much more common in West Virginia and more higher mountains of the Appalachians. But it occurs at Riverbend Park, and it's one of the only areas in Virginia that occurs as much as it does. And so that's one of the things that is kind of unique about Riverbend is the black maple population. And the high terrace floodplain forest has several of those. In fact, they have some of the largest ones in the state. And they're not super large trees, so that kind of tells you that how uncommon they are. They're pretty medium-sized trees, actually, but they're definitely one you can find not many other places in the state, and definitely not anywhere else in Fairfax County. The next map is going to show you another example of the rich boulder field forest, and another example of the floodplain forest I mentioned. But it also shows you this small little yellow sliver kind of right above it, right along the river, right where the bend of the river kind of starts. And that's known as the Central Appalachian Bedrock Floodplain Scour Woodland. And that is by far our most unique community. It's kind of right where the water first starts to go and flood from the river when the water rises. And the plants that grow there are kind of a unique mix of plants that kind of prefer that sort of scouring characteristic. And so there's some species of sedge that you don't typically find growing together with some species of trees, such as persimmon, sugar maple is another one, and then another rare species known as the sweet-scented Indian plantain. So this is one that we're going to be looking at closely because we have noticed some more invasive species that weren't as prevalent in the past there. So we're going to be working a little bit more focused on that as well. Some of the areas we're going to be removing invasives, we're going to be doing live staking planting. So you might start to see some areas that kind of look like they've been torn apart in the park where invasives have been cut, pulled down, and there's just little bits of stakes sticking out of the ground. Some of those might be the ones that we cut in the past, but some of them also might be stakes that we planted. The picture on the right is one that was actually a native species put into the ground. It was cut and harvested in the early spring, and we watered it, and it actually sprouted a new branch. So that's actually a button bush. And so we're going to be trying to fill in a lot of these areas that have eroded with native species so that they take over and then they fill in and grow in the bank. So our hope is that we're going to be kind of restoring these eroded riverbanks and restoring some of the areas we've been removing invasive plants through these live staking. So you might start seeing us doing that along the river as well. This is our natural resource intern, Natalie Brennan, from the past season. And one of her big projects was working on our inventory One of the ways we do that is we use trail cameras. So she's actually there with our one of our new trail cameras. A big thank you to Forb. They actually helped fund her position and fund the trail cameras. So one of the reasons for doing this is to look for target species that are not as common. Some examples are bobcat, gray fox, black bear, mink, river otter. So we had about 6 cameras out this year, and we confirmed river otter in certain areas and mink, and I'll show you some pictures in a moment of those. No gray fox, no bobcat, no black bear, but we're going to be continuously looking for those and others on the cameras. We also continuously added our vernal pool monitoring, so we monitor 4 pools year round, and some temporary pools as well for water quality testing and for species observation. So a few pictures from that. Picture on the left are 2 eastern newts, a common amphibian that we find in the park, but isn't found in lots of other areas of Fairfax County. So definitely a cool one. The one on the right is a long-tailed salamander, pretty commonly found in some parts of Riverbend Park, but again, not super common elsewhere in Fairfax County. So definitely one we keep an eye on and find. And then here's some of our camera photos. The one on the left there is a river otter by our Carper's Pond, which is kind of near the river. One on the right is a coyote. We always knew there were coyotes in the park, but our cameras constantly pick them up. So it's rare that we actually see them, but we do see them through this method. So that's what's nice about having game cameras. So you can actually view and see wildlife and see some behavior. We monitored a couple den sites and learned some interesting things and how often the same den sites are shared by different animals at different times of the year. So red foxes might be using them in the winter, and then all of a sudden in the summer, possums using it. So it was kind of interesting. Next picture shows a mink on the left. It's kind of blurry, but you can kind of see him there. And this red fox just decided to like take a nap in front of our camera. So it's not necessarily a rare species or a target one. We knew we had red foxes, but definitely thought we'd share it. And that's the end of our presentation. So I wasn't sure how much time you all had for questions that we can answer. I know we had about 40 minutes, so definitely let us know. We're happy to clarify anything.
To turn the sound back on.
So I can speak to him.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, I guess I
Does anybody have any questions out there?
realized my camera was off. Sorry.
The whole time.
Yeah,
we
just this black
wondering what
screen
you were
talking to
doing.
everybody. Yeah.
Hey,
I see Bill Canis is in the group here, and he's
Oh yeah, great.
volunteers.
He's been in there with us in the trenches.
We've been wondering what he's been doing since he's retired from being our president of the Citizens Association. Now we know.
Yep.
So I had a question regarding the spotted lanternfly. So I know that it's attracted to those trees of heaven. But if people don't have trees of heaven, well, why should they care about spotted lanternflies?
Good question. So they are classified as an agricultural pest currently. So I'll use an example. I've been telling everybody about this. My wife and I are a member of Barrel Oak Winery, and we go there pretty often. And the landscape out there is littered with tree of heaven all along 66, everywhere. And so the tree of heaven just gives the spotted lanternflies kind of a foothold to start in. And then they can move on to orchard species, apple trees, plum trees, pear trees, grape vines, which are all very susceptible to sap-sucking insects like that. And there has been documentation of them getting on maples and walnuts as well, which is a concern for me at Riverbend. They're currently not classified as a forest pest, which is good, but there have been other insects that have started that way and then became forest pests later. So there's still some uncertainty as to what will happen with spotted lanternflies as they increase in population in Virginia. Obviously, we have some information given further north. They've been around for longer. So I'll be working closely with our urban forestry group, which kind of takes the lead on forest pests like that. And not just forest pests, but they have been doing work on documentation and working on removing tree of heaven, and hopefully we'll start potentially transitioning into spotted lanternfly removal directly. The method of control for spotted lanternflies thus far has been tree of heaven removal to prevent them from getting that foothold. So that's the concern.
I have a question. I know of a large patch of celandine that's off of Maria, and it flows down into the Potomac, but into Great Falls, not into Riverbend. And you can see the whole path where the water has gone, and it has spread, and it's heading for the river. And so I'm wondering, is there a possibility of treating the original patch and on right down? Because you can see it in the spring. You can see where it's moving.
You said it's off of what road was it?
Maria.
Maria Road. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective and my job, I'm pretty much focused on the park only. There could be, and so it would depend on whoever the property owner is. I'm not sure, but knowing about it is also helpful because I could, if it intersects in the park in a specific spot, we can get ahead of that and know that it's coming there and try to be ready for that. But unfortunately, I'm not allowed to work outside the boundaries of the park. So we do communicate quite a bit with, we'll try to communicate with Great Falls and Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority on maintenance issues and invasive species. So I'm wanting to get more contacts with Nature Conservancy because they also oversee the Fraser Preserve, which is also north of us as well. So, but yeah, that's if it's off our property, there's not a whole lot I can do, but knowing where it is helpful. So I'll look into that and see where that
Well,
takes us in the park.
If you tell me which person to contact at Great Falls, I will. I've called you in the past about fallen trees on the fire road, things like that. So I'll be happy to call somebody down there because I think that they would like to do something about it because there's a stream that goes right by and it's going to carry those seeds too.
Oh, I see. I'm looking on the map right now. It's off Riverbend Road, Maria Avenue. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's closer to the fire road.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we have a couple other questions. Karen Washburn?
Candy Burke had her hand up long before.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Candy then. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Casey, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question about the Ficaria verna. I have property here in Great Falls, and I'm right across from a blue water stream. I've had Ficaria, I guess, on my property for about 7 years. There is absolutely no way I'm able to get rid of it. I want to know, what do you use as an herbicide? If you would tell, and if it's non-selective, then that's going to be a problem if it's in the landscape. I've watched it, and I've actually called Fairfax County about it actually during COVID, and they said there's probably about a 15-page form that you have to fill out for them to come and look at it, and you have to put who's going to do spray, what are they going to be doing. I went, you guys made it so complicated. I've watched it move. It's all the way off my property across Beach Mill, over on Nichols Run, which goes right down into the, it's just taken over the ferns, everything. It is just a horrible plant.
Yes, it is.
Can you tell me what you use to spray on your herbicide?
We actually use a couple different depending on the season. One of the things that it is non-selective, so it is, in the time of year is kind of the crucial thing for that. So we try to get it as early as possible where we can see as much of the plant as possible, like in March and even in February. And where the other spring ephemerals aren't up, so we're not damaging them. And so we'll use Aquaneat, which is a glyphosate-based product. And so it's called that because it is safe to use in aquatic areas. Or we'll use another one is Garlon 3A, which is a triclopyr. That's the chemical-based herbicide. Both are non-selective, so you do have to be careful. Although the triclopyr product tends to not impact grasses as much. It's more of a broadleaf herbicide, so it is a little bit more selective in that regard. But if it's broadleaf and you get a little bit on it, and then it's the percentage. So it's not just the direct herbicide. It is used with water as a carrier, and it's typically a 2 to 3% concentration. So pretty low, you know, on the lower end of concentration.
And can I ask you one more quick question? I thought it was interesting you didn't mention stilt grass as one of your top 5. I'm assuming it would be number 6.
Right. No, so it's stilt grass for us. We do treat it. We work pretty hard, but we focus in the restoration areas primarily. And in my job, I've been here about 2.5 years. It's definitely a focus, and it's one I want to give a little bit more attention to. But as when I started here, kind of my priority was these are the areas we've invested time and energy and funds in, and they're doing really well, but they have like bits of stilt grass here and there. And so I kind of immediately jumped on let's hit this, let's prevent the stilt grass from taking over certain restoration areas. And from there, I'm going to try to expand kind of my stilt grass operations per se. We actually had some success it's actually in our roadside meadow after about 2 to 3 years straight of treating with herbicide. We found several patches didn't grow back. And so stilt grass, just so everyone's aware, it's Japanese stilt grass is an annual versus a lot of the plants I talked about were perennial. And so it only lives one season. But it drops a whole heck of a lot of seeds in that one season. And a lot of those seeds can continuously, so some may not sprout the next year, but they could sprout up to 10 years later. I think it's 10 years. And so you can treat a stilt grass or pull it all up constantly, but if those seeds are still in the seed bank, there can possibly regrowing every season. So you have to really kind of work on it for years. The one good thing about stilt grass is it is susceptible to, if there's enough leaf litter on the ground, it's a little bit harder for it to punch through. So it may not, in some areas of the forest where we have, you know, pretty heavy, dense leaf cover, you won't necessarily see it punching through as much. So yeah, hopefully I will expand it. It's definitely one that we work on. It's just kind of more focused in those areas.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah.
Aaron?
I'm going to tackle this from a different angle. I'm a historian, and I've spent 48 years of my life tromping around Riverbend Park, sometimes 300 days a year. And I'm wondering, you've talked about the natural resources here, but what are you doing to protect the archaeological resources? And yes, I know they were surveying for them a couple of years ago, and I spent a lot of time talking to the surveyors because I happen to work very closely for many years with their boss.
Oh, cool.
The fact of the matter is that when I was serving as history commissioner for this area with Fairfax County, I marked off 2 trash dumps in Riverbend Park because they were getting ready to have a trash cleanup. And I said, leave these alone. These trash dumps were more than 100 years old. They were full of archaeological remnants. Oh no, the people that were busy volunteering cleaned them all out. End of those. We have evidence from the dig that was done, 30 years ago to put in the Clark's Branch Bridge that we have, and they had to only do test pits there. And I was there daily talking to the archaeologists. And those test pits where he had to quit showed evidence of 13,000 years of Native American habitation. The entire park is a giant archaeological site. And furthermore, since, in a way, I've failed to understand why there is this great push to attract visitors and be happy that you had 400,000 visitors, because they're damaging the park. It's a very, very fragile resource. And so when COVID hit and 1 million people had tackled that park, the misname, by the way, it is a misname, Bootleggers Trail, that's not where they were working, was the steep slopes and that were cobbled. The cobbles were from the plantation days of the Jacksons owning the property, and all of them have been eroded out from thousands of people walking over them. So what are you guys doing to protect our cultural heritage there?
Yeah, and on my side is pretty much focused on natural resource management. So there's some I can speak to with that. Obviously the big part is we do have the archaeological group that we work with. Anytime we're doing a project, we do have them come and check if we're digging into anything for any archaeological significant resources. I'm not familiar with the trash cleanup that you brought up, but I'm sure Kylie would be interested in knowing more about that too. And a lot of that side of stuff we kind of hand over to the archaeological group. That's not my expertise, so there's not a whole lot I can speak to with that. Anytime I'm around some of the old house foundation sites, I'm obviously very careful. There have been some situations where there's invasive trees and plants around them, and I do try to be extra careful with any work that we're doing, minimizing any digging, anything like that. And I'm definitely sensitive to the visitation in the park. I can tell you, as a natural resource manager, we're constantly kind of evaluating any trails that we need to reroute because of excess visitation. Many of our kind of Potomac Heritage Trail plantings are actually specifically focused on areas where people are going off trail, and we're trying to stop them from doing that. And so we're constantly roping off areas, talking to people that we find in those areas, and working on better signage to help educate them as to why it's important to stay on trails as well as protect resources. So I can tell you protection of both is important to us. We're constantly, if we see someone that looks like they might be collecting, whether it's natural resources or cultural resources, we talk to them. That is a huge focus for us, and we document it. So that's kind of my side of it. And I don't know if Kylie, you want to add anything.
Yeah, thank you, Casey, and thank you, Karen. Absolutely. Riverbend Park is a very sensitive archaeological site, and staff are educated on these things, and we work very closely with archaeological collections branch as well too. So just like Casey said, we really we do everything we can to keep folks on trail, not collecting, no relic hunting, things of that nature, and also through education as well.
But the problem is it isn't just on the trails. The trails that are heavily in use in the park are also part of the archaeological sites. Mm-hmm. Some of those trails have been there. George Washington spent a huge amount of time right there in Riverbend Park. And having read my way through his diaries, yes, I can prove it. Especially when he started there as a teenager crossing on the ferry. So there is a huge amount of information archaeologically in that position. And yes, I understand that you all do the best you can with this, but it's more than anything else, this great attraction to let's get more people into this park to use these trails. That's what's destroying it. So maybe part of the conservation effort is a more limited effort for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Hey, Winnie. Winnie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm not sure who this is, but
Casey, John Roots with the Garden Club. We've been dealing with Johnson grass in the meadow at the library. Mm-hmm. And two questions. One is, do you have it in the park? And the other is, could you tell us what you use on it?
We do unfortunately have it. Good news is it's pretty limited. There was actually a very small patch in our biggest restoration meadow in 2023. And we found it kind of quickly. I'd seen some old records of it. It was kind of right along the trail, in fact. So I imagine it maybe was just tracked in. And we did use a non-selective herbicide. I believe it was a glyphosate-based product. I think it was a pretty low, like 1% to 2% concentration. And I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was. It was probably either our Aquaneat or like a Roundup Pro based. And we treated it kind of right early in its bloom time before it seeded. So I think that was probably early July. So it was easy to kind of pick out. based on its bloom. And it didn't come back the next year, which I was kind of surprised about because I hadn't personally had a lot of experience with that species, but it's definitely one that, you know, I've seen before and I'm aware of. There's also a lot of it actually at our gas pipeline easement. We don't do a ton of herbicide application there because it's an easement, although we have done some limited stuff because it is close to some sensitive areas. But there's some of it there as well. So that's what I've seen success with just in my short time. But I'm sure there's other methods of removing it. I just would need to do some research.
You mentioned Roundup Pro,
Mhm.
and were you diluting that 1 to 2%?
Yeah. So mostly water, just with a
98% water.
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like there's a Henry with his hand up too. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Thanks for this great presentation.
Winnie,
Many,
your mic is off, Winnie. We can't hear you.
I was just, thanks, Jerry. I was just trying to get Henry to speak, and of course, Henry, you didn't hear me.
great.
So I will go back on mute. Go ahead, Henry.
A question for you all. Thanks for this great presentation. Many of us live adjacent to the park, within a quarter mile, a half mile, even a mile. And I'm sure that decisions that we make about how we manage nature on our property could affect your work. Could you give us 2 things that we could do on our properties that would make your job easier?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, kind of the first thing I think of is a lot of invasive species make their way into the park because they're planted nearby. You know, and so being kind of sensitive to the types of, you know, plants that you have in your yard. And I know that for a lot of people, like they bought their house as is, and that's what was already there. So it's not necessarily something they did on purpose, but that's just kind of what they bought into. But, you know, learning about what you have in your yard and if it is something that could be a threat. You know, one example is Japanese maple, not necessarily considered an invasive in a lot of circles, but there's a number that very common ornamental tree, really pretty tree, but we have started finding them in like some borders of the park, and so I've removed them. Thankfully, it's not to a scale that it's been any major threat, but that's just one example. I would say one of the things we do occasionally find is released wildlife. So not that I would say a lot of people do this, but if you're finding, you know, wildlife around your house and that you're concerned about, you can always ask us. We're always happy to talk to neighbors and any visitors and educate about things that might be living both in the park and in the neighborhoods. The animals recognize no boundaries, so they will live in all parts of the park and in all parts of the houses. So if there's ever a question about an animal, feel free to reach out. We love, you know, answering those kinds of questions. So learning about that. If you're concerned about, you know, something bigger, like I'm happy to give you more resources. So not releasing things that are found in your yard in the park, and keeping that in mind. You know, where you found it is probably where it lives, and it's probably doing fine there. I'm trying to think of anything else. You said 2 things. I guess I did say 2. But yeah, I mean, you know, I love meeting the neighbors and people. So anytime you see us on the trail, just, you know, strike up a conversation.
Also, Henry, this time of
Yeah.
year, I don't think it's a problem, particularly for Riverbend, but we do from time to time find leftover pumpkins in the park, and we do not want pumpkins in our parks either. So
Yeah.
Well, I'll go back and then collect mine that I brought with. Just kidding. Thanks very much.
Yeah, parks often become kind of places where, you know, it's oh, this is an easy place to dump my lawn clippings or my Christmas tree, and it's easy to think that's like, okay, it's just one thing. The problem is when you find like 6 of them, 8 of them, 10 of them, and it becomes a big, and that attracts more. And so just being sensitive to that and know that, you know, that's not something that the park is for. The park is for, we're a resource-based park, sensitive natural resource site. So not a dumping ground. So not that I'm accusing anybody of doing that. I just, yeah.
Okay, Jerry, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to, excuse me, I wanted to respond to Henry's question, if I can. I'm with the Northern Virginia Bird Alliance, formerly the Audubon Society in Northern Virginia, and we have a program called Wildlife Sanctuaries. It works with homeowners
yeah.
to develop bird-friendly, wildlife-friendly habitat on private property and be certified by Audubon as a wildlife sanctuary. So Winnie, I believe, has my email address, and I'd be happy to put you in, or anyone here on the call, in touch with our folks who run that program, and you can start down the road of being a good habitat friend to Riverbend Park.
And you can start small. I was a board member for them for a number of years. And so it's a great organization. Even if you're just like, I want to plant a native tree, Earth Sangha is a great local resource. We get all of our plants from them for our restoration plantings. And they're looking at expanding soon. So they're hopefully going to have even more stuff available. So even if you plant a, arrowwood viburnum in your yard, or a flowering dogwood, silky dogwood, something that wildlife, will hopefully help spread through eating fruits into the park, and just those little things can make a difference. And then, or you can go the route of some people I know that've turned their whole yard into a meadow, essentially. So there's lots of different ways to get it up, but that's a great resource. That's great. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, everybody. Wow, great engaged group tonight. This is wonderful. Well, I really have to thank Casey and Kylie so much, and I'm so glad to know what those big yellow X's are for.
Oh yeah, if you saw those, that's what that's really to make sure that the Davy Tree Company was cutting down the right tree.
Excellent idea. I'm glad it's not blue. So we thank you very, very much, and I'm sure I'm going to be probably following up with you, Casey, on a few things, but I don't want to keep you guys any longer. But the rest of it, we'd like to let the park staff have a good night's rest. They've been working all day, and we have a few other things we want to go through before we get off the line, if that's okay. But thanks a lot, Casey and Kylie, very much. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Very informative. So let's go over the other items that we had on our agenda. They're mostly announcements, but we want to make sure we bring them up for everybody before you all take off. So I'll let Lisa start with the I think we're starting with which one is it, Lisa? The one on the Legislative Special Committee, I think.
Yeah, we just wanted to let everybody know that the GFCA Legislative Special Committee that we kicked off last year will be continuing this year. If you participated last year, you should be hearing some news about when that committee will meet from Jennifer Falcone in December or January. And but if you're kind of interested in following environmental policy at the Virginia state level, definitely reach out to me or Winnie if you want to get involved specifically in the environmental policy side. Some of the policy topics we're going to be looking at more closely this year are anything to do with tree preservation, invasives. How do we stop this from the source? That came up last year in the General Assembly and unfortunately didn't go forward, but we're going to keep following what policies may be proposed this year. We expect to see a lot around data centers, which one of our speakers, a speaker in September spoke about. And then we're also interested in seeing what's going to be proposed to help improve water quality. You may have heard of PFAS, forever chemicals. I know there's some policies on the table about how do we improve water quality for humans, but also wildlife. And then the last big topic, which is important in Fairfax County this year, but then also more conversations are happening statewide, and that has to do with moving towards zero waste, which will also impact ideally the amount of litter that we see in the environment and other sources of pollution. So those are the kind of the 5 big areas we're going to be tracking that will have impacts locally. And again, if you're interested, keep an eye out for the emails about the special committee on legislation, or reach out to me and Winnie specifically.
And we will have a program on zero waste next June. They're going to be launching that program later on in the new year. So we'll have a big program on that. So that'll be coming up.
Yeah, it's exciting, kind of this proposal that they are coming up with locally. Then there are two other events happening in November I wanted you to be aware of, and we'll send out the details as well. One is about dark skies, more an educational event around dark skies, hosted by Dark Sky Nova. It's called Save the Night, Light Pollution Awareness and Dark Skies Day. This is going to be on Sunday, November 17th from 3 to 6 p.m. It'll be in Vienna at the Vienna Community Center. And it looks like they'll have a planetarium set up. There'll be astronomers, they can do telescopes. They'll talk about the value of dark skies to animals, plants, and humans. So it's just a great, and then what we can do. So I know many of you have probably already educated on dark skies, but it's kind of a great way to bring one of your neighbors or your family members, and it sounds like a fun event. So we'll send more information about that. And then the third event is 2 days later on the 19th at 7 p.m. And this is a group of local environmental advocacy groups that are coming together to do a comment writing party via Zoom. So Tim last month talked about the proposed park funding budget cuts that they were asked to create, the non-recommended cuts. So this party is all about writing comments to the Board of Supervisors and the county executive, just asking to not cut funds to our parks. So they are going to do a round of comment writing in the fall and then again in the spring once the budget is announced. So we'll send out the details for how to register for that as well.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And then I wanted to put a plug in for our December 2nd program, which will be on site at the old schoolhouse. And Karen Washburn, who's on the program tonight, our local historian, will be giving a program that evening about the schoolhouse, in particular about the days when it was a schoolhouse. And she's got a lot of oral histories from back in the day when kids were actually going to school there. So we're looking forward to a program by Karen on that. She's busy preparing it for us now. And I'm going to send out a notice about that and see if you guys can let me know if you're coming or not, because if it gets to be a large group, then we may move into the Grange, the schoolhouse program, or if it's a smaller group, we'll stay in the schoolhouse. Anything else you want to say about Karen, about that, since you're there?
I will also have a PowerPoint of a few of the old pictures.
Great.
Not
Okay.
a ton. The other thing, even though it's not in our jurisdiction exactly, Meadowlark sent out their invitations today that their tickets are open for their winter light show. And this supports Meadowlark's incredible gardens over there. So if anybody's interested, the tickets are going on sale, I think the 8th of November. Or they're on sale now and they open on the 8th of November.
Yeah. My sister actually works at it.
Nice.
I've been over there a lot. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is the holiday ornament, which when you got your invitation for tonight, you learned about. And that's also this year, our fundraising ornament is all about the schoolhouse. So we're keeping a theme going here. And the ornaments, again, they're $20 and they're supporting our fundraiser this year to write and produce exhibits on the old schoolhouse and on the Grange. So, you know, we want to keep sharing our stories about Great Falls. It's really important for our community. We lost our historical society about 5 years ago, and we're looking to ourselves to try to keep that history alive. So I really appreciate the support for that holiday ornament. It's on sale at the, Great Dogs, at the Creamery, at Bricks, and at the Wine Outlet. Those are the 4 different shopping areas around Great Falls. So I hope you look into getting one of those and supporting this really good cause. So with that, if anybody else has something that they want to announce or
Yes,
share.
let me, Winnie, this is Tim. Let me just mention something. There was an event, Park Authority event down at the Woodland Center at EC Lawrence Park Friday night. to announce the unveiling of Poetry in the Parks signs. The Poetry in the Parks program has been going on for about 2 years at various parks. But there are going to be signs placed at E.C. Lawrence and at Riverbend, inviting people to submit digitally their poems of their contemplations in the park. So those, I don't know if the sign has already been installed. It may have been. I've seen the one at E.C. Lawrence, but I haven't seen the one at Riverbend yet. But anyway, it's out there, and sit on along the river, sit on a bench, enjoy the birds and the sounds and the smells and the views, and create your poem and put it in the collective consciousness online. So that's it.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Wow, that's wonderful. Okay, and you notice we have another Jerry here. We have a new member. This is very exciting. Welcome, Jerry.
Thanks
So
a lot. Appreciate it. Interesting meeting.
Great. Well, thanks everybody tonight. And Lisa and I and Tim are going to stay on the line, but we thank you so much for your time. You stayed a little late, but I think it was worth it. Absolutely.
Great
All right.
presentation.
Good
Thank you
evening.
all.
Thank you. Okay, there's so it looks like a few people are interested in still listening.
So is there a way for the host to, there we